All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here at 2023 preview and prediction for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Looking at this revamped coaching staff, Matt Rhule, 3 of his 7 seasons as a CFB head coach have been 10-plus win campaigns. That includes his time at Baylor and Temple. I think it didn't exactly work out in Carolina for him. Here he places Scott Frost, a complete dumpster fire that was 6 straight losing seasons for the Cornhuskers. Marcus Satterfield spent the past 2 seasons at South Carolina. He was on staff with Rhule in 2020 with the Panthers. Tony White, past 3 years with Syracuse as a defensive play caller. So this is a very interesting move that Nebraska goes ahead and pays Matt Rhule to try and get them back on track. Looking at this offense, it was a complete disaster for them. Scott Frost, when he arrived, he was expected to be a bit of an offensive mastermind. Was really good at his days with Oregon, over a decade ago. The offense at UCF was very good. Comes to Nebraska, you didn't see that one bit. Adrian Martinez, he never really developed into a good player. And then last year, it cultivated with a offense that was outside the top 100, almost every single category, less than 23 points per game. Complete revampment here, though, Nick. They pick up Marcus Satterfield. They lost 15 players in the portal. They added 8 of them. 3 of those coming on the offensive line. They return 8 starters, though. That might be some good news. Look at that quarterback position. Jeff Sims comes over from Georgia Tech at a very nice spring. This is a player that certainly showcased some nice flashes when he was with the Yellow Jackets. Remember him and Jahmyr Gibbs were teammates at one point there in Atlanta. Nice size, 6'4", 220, good arm, excellent abilities as a runner. The decision-making and processing certainly has lacked at times, but following a big-time spring, they're hoping he can be the catalyst here to get this offense sparked up a little bit. This position's not been great for Nebraska over the past couple years. Again, Adrian Martinez never really took that next step under Frost. What do you make of this new staff, Nick, and what do you think Jeff Sims is going to be able to do this year?
Exciting to see Matt Rhule out in Lincoln, Nebraska. Nebraska's a sleeping giant. I've said for a while on this show that if they can get the right coach in there, they're a program that's waiting to wake up from their sleep, and they could really be a dominant program in college football. They got a great NIL war chest, a very passionate fan base, great boosters, a lot of money out there in Nebraska. And, for the last 20 years, this team has been a bottom feeder program in college football, and really ever since they fired Bo Pelini, they've been struggling. I don't think he deserved to get fired in the way he did. Scott Frost did not work. Just mistake after mistake. That poor onside kick against Northwestern on Ireland, and mistake after mistake. They fired him very early. They could have waited just a few weeks to avoid paying a crazy buyout. Instead, they just cut him at the time and just went with that. Matt Rhule, I think it's a good hire. He's got good experience. Spent time at Temple, obviously, where he won the conference of the American Conference and won back-to-back division titles in 2015-16. Spent some time at Baylor, where was pretty good start for his career at Baylor before he jumped ship, head to the NFL. Obviously, I didn't really think the move to the NFL was the right move. And also at Baylor, he was dealing with a transition after Art Briles, the whole scandal that kind of was around that. So a tough spot to step into, and he really did not have a bad showing with that 7-6 and then 11-3 season with Sugar Bowl loss. So I think he's the right hire here for the Cornhuskers. I like this a lot. I think this makes sense. And I think, bringing in a guy like Sims is not a bad quarterback to bring in. I think, like you said, he nailed it with the size. The size, I think, is fantastic. 6'4", 215. Really great size for a good quarterback there. Good experience at Georgia Tech and limited appearances. Not bad numbers at all, certainly. This past season, he only played 7 games, but he had decent numbers, 288 yards in the ground on a score for him. He also had 5 touchdowns and 1,100 yards through the air. So I think he's got a lot of potential. Very solid player. He has some potential here. I think he can fit in this offense and be a good piece for them. I think they've made a good move here, bringing a guy like Sims, and hopefully that Nebraska can kind of start to get a pulse together on offense, because this offense was terrible last year in the hundreds in pretty much every category except pass yards per game, which was 80th, which is not much better.
A spread option approach here for Satterfield, and I think he has a pretty deep supporting cast. Anthony Grant, an explosive contact-friendly back. He was a JUCO transfer, was previously at Florida State before that. Ramir Johnson, he's likely the best back in terms of being shifty. Gabe Irvin also is pretty good. The running back room has more talent than the overall production showed of 123 yards per game. You look at wide receiver that pick up Billy Kemp from Virginia. Has versatility, but he mainly thrives in the slot with some great quickness that allows him to fly off the line of scrimmage. Good acceleration after the catch at 5'9", 172. Marcus Washington, a nice deep threat. He transferred in from Texas a season ago. Good route runner downfield. His speed allows him to get separation from the start. He's not afraid to go after the ball either. And then you look at Isaiah Garcia Castaneda. He was great in week 1. Didn't really see the field much after that. Xavier Betts finally became academic eligible this year. That's going to be a big-time addition. Very quiet, sneaky ad that I didn't even know about until just a little bit ago. A lot of transfers here, Nick. The top 3 receivers are likely, they all come from different schools. Joshua Fleeks comes over from Baylor, and then an incoming 4-star Malachi Coleman figures to see time. Quite solid foundation at wide receiver. I think Jeff Sims has a nice group to work with. Trey Palmer, of course, last year, another guy who transferred in, put up 1,000-plus yards think this is one positional group they really have figured out.
Certainly a good building block here. I think Marcus Washington's a great deep threat wide receiver. I like him a lot. Limited appearances last year. He had 471 total yards, 15.2 yards per catch, and a score for him. I think Anthony Grant at running back's a fantastic piece, nearly 1,000 yards on the ground for him, 6 scores. He also had 18 catches out of the backfield, 100 yards in those 18 catches, about 5 yards per catch. So I think he's a solid piece to have. I think when you have a back that can catch in the backfield, it's a very talented sort of thing to have. Isaiah Garcia Castellan is a very good player as well. He had battled some injury issues, some other stuff off the field, but he's got some potential. He had 120 yards on 5 catches this past season, so if he can be used fully, I think it's a solid piece. Billy Kemp coming over from Virginia, I like the size there, 5'9", 172, good speed, bit of a smaller frame. I think he's got some nice potential. And when you bring in those 4 stars, Malachi Coleman looks to be the first of some of the bigger recruits that Nebraska has. I know there isn't a whole lot of talent in the state of Nebraska, but if with Matt Rhule in charge and kind of locking that down, they should be able to keep all the talent they do have in state, which I think is a huge thing. He's got to win your in-state recruiting battles. Then you can start picking off from Iowa and Oklahoma and Kansas and nearby areas and start really bringing in some talent here. I think Matt Rhule will be able to recruit efficiently and get those offensive weapons in.
They really had to fight to keep Malachi Coleman home. They were able to do so at the end of the day. Biggest reason why this offensive grade is a B- is because this offensive line is awful. They were the 3rd worst pass block grade unit in college football a year ago. Teddy Proshka really struggled at left tackle in 3 games before a season-ending injury. He had 14 pressures in just those 3 games. Tucker Cochran, on the other hand, allowed the 4th most pressures in FBS in his absence. So the left tackle spot was just atrocious all year long. He ended the year with a 13 PFF pass blocking grade. I don't even know what that is. Bryce Bernhardt was awful at the right tackle spot himself. Ben Scott comes over from Arizona State. Hasn't been a great pass blocker in his career, but he has a nice size of 6'5", 310, offers some resilience in the run game. Nordine Nowili returns after a suspension. He was quite good at left guard in 2021. They're hoping he can step back in and continue to provide a boost for this unit. Ethan Piper, manned that position last season, also wasn't that great. Experience is a premium, Nick, but how can one entire offensive line have a single player that performed positively?
A very poor offensive line top to bottom. I mean, they have to find a way to make this work. They were just bad all over the place. Mistake after mistake, really struggle on the pass block grades, like you said. We're just poor. I mean, very bad unit overall. They got to find a way. Tucker Cochran, he's struggled. He's got to find a way to be involved. I mean, this is just a bad unit top to bottom. The experience, there is some experience here, but these guys just are not great. They really should have found a way to get more people out of the portal. I know they grabbed Ben Scott, a transfer, but otherwise they really avoided any portal work for this defense, for this offensive line. They had to find a way to do it. I mean, this is just a very poor offensive line, very poorly graded. It's going to be the one thing holding this offense back, certainly a year run from Matt Rhule, is that this is a very poor offensive line. They're going to have to start recruiting in the trenches to try and bring some talent in.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a big increase in yards up to about the 400 mark, and I think we'll be at about 28 points per game or more than that. Those are the bars for me. What about you, Nick? Because I definitely like the supporting cast. I think Jeff Sims following a big spring's playing with some great confidence under a new offensive coordinator, but this offensive line could really hold them back significantly, and I'd hate to see that because I definitely think there's some good potential here to really shake things up in the Big Ten.
There certainly is some potential. I think 400 yards per game is certainly possible, or you're looking at about 60 extra yards per game. I think you can hit that mark. 28, I think, is a little lofty. I think closer to 25 points per game is kind of where I think this team is going to be at. Definitely an improvement, right? 3 points per game improvement. But I just think that they're going to struggle in the red zone when they're in those tight situations and they need to hold up, protect the quarterback, and the offensive line just falls apart in the red zone. It's going to really stall this team out. They're going to be forced to kick a lot this year. I think that's going to be the one thing kind of holding them back.
The offense certainly disappointed last year, as did the defense. I was very happy with some of the portal ads they made a season ago. Thought they picked up some big-time impactful players, and that just ended up not being true one bit. Obviously, Scott Frost really just did not know what he was doing, it seems, in terms of putting these pieces together. But he definitely put together a nice roster last year in the portal, so I definitely give him credit for that. About 28 points per game allowed for this defense. They lost 10 guys in the portal, added only 4. They do return 8 starters. That's the one thing going for them is they have a lot of experience coming back on this football team. 4 of the top 5 tacklers are also back. Look at the defensive line. The pass rush was 1 sack better than in 2021. They were very disappointing in the trenches. That wasn't a good number at all. Ty Robinson, Nash Hutchmacher on the interior D-line. They have some experience and some nice strength, but playmaking wasn't evident between the two, even though Ty Robinson, I think, was certainly better in certain aspects of his game. They added M.J. Sherman and Chief Borders from SEC East rivals to hopefully boost the run defense. Those guys coming from Georgia and Florida, respectively. True freshman Princewell Umanamilia, his brother, of course, plays for the Gators. Cameron Lenhart, Elijah Judy from Texas A&M. No proven assets on this D-line. Some of those new fresh faces. This is probably going to be a liability for this football team, Nick, because they picked up guys like Stephon Wynn last year who didn't really end up doing much for them. What's the expectation for this unit up here? It certainly has some potential.
there is some potential. I think Ty Robinson is a good piece. 24 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 2 sacks for him. Not Hutchmacher as well. He's got potential. He had 15 total tackles. But overall, I think the depth is kind of worrying. They did make some moves out of the portal, right? They grabbed some guys. They did some recruiting as well and landed some good true freshmen that have some potential as well that I'm looking at. But overall, I think this is a pretty shallow defensive line. It certainly is probably the one big issue here. I think the back half of this defense is a lot better. I think this front three here is a little bit tough to look at. I think Ty Robinson, nose tackle, though, is a good guy on the interior.
Of course, they moved to a 3-3-5 on defense, which has been very good for Matt Rhule at the college ranks. You know, Luke Reamer, he's been an impactful tackler in his career, really good in coverage. But overall, him and Nick Henrik, who've been around together a long time, have been poorly graded players. They do not show great pursuit or stopping abilities in the run game. Depth at this position and scheme change will be something to monitor. You know, I thought they had some solid depth last year, but that isn't all that evident this season. But I definitely like the leadership they have in the middle in these two veterans, Garrett Snodgrass, John Bullock. These guys are going to get involved. And of course, you know, with outside linebackers, MJ Sherman and Chief Borders. Of course, just talked about them on the D line, but remains to be seen what their overall role will be. But in this 3-3-5, I'm very interested to see what those two transfers can do. Again, coming from SEC programs, I think they're going to be expected to really step up here in that position and try to help these guys in the middle out, and Henrik and Ramir. What are your thoughts on the linebacker group, Nick? Because I certainly think the production is evident, and then some new faces are certainly going to step up. I'm really not sure what the expectation is for this front six overall, though, considering they undergo the scheme change following, you know, a pretty poor season against the run, and, you know, they weren't too bad against the pass.
Transition to 3-3-5. I like the 3-3-5 a lot. I think it can work for teams in the Big Ten where it's a little more physical of a play. Luke Ramir, I think he's a good player. 86 total tackles, led the team, so it's always good to get your top return tackler back. 3.5 tackles for loss, 1 sack, 1 interception, 5 pass breakups. He's kind of a do-it-all kind of player. Nick Henrik as well is a good piece. 37 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss. I need to see his production. Obviously, he only played 5 games last year, so certainly part of the reason why his production was lower. So you could kind of do the math. If he's kept that pace, you know, he'd be pushing closer to 90 tackles this past season. So certainly not his fault that he was injured throughout this past season. And obviously there is some serious talent there with Henrik and Ramir. I think Ramir is a good player. I like him a lot. Good natural born leader. So I want to see him have close to, I want to see him get to 100 tackles this year. I certainly think it's possible. Henrik can stay healthy. He could probably push that 100 tackle mark as well.
And I think the second best positional group on this football team, I think the first one's probably wide receiver, and then the secondary is right after that. Isaac Gifford was the team's best DB. He was a good run defender, strong tackler, wasn't that awful in coverage, lined up all over the place. Quentin Newsome provided plenty of quality reps at corner. He has plenty of toughness. At the safety spot, Marquise Buford was a great tackler, but needs to showcase that same impact in the coverage aspect of things. While Omar Brown, he should slide into the starting lineup. Malcolm Hartzog, he took some big strides as an outside cornerback. Likely shifts to the slot this fall. Tommy Hill, Miles Farmer, they're back after getting some good reps for this football team a year ago. Farmer was a quite good player for them at the safety spot. This is overall quality, sound secondary I have a lot of belief in. I was high on them coming into last season, and I'd say they kind of, did what they could, considering the rest of the team didn't really step up around them. 68th against the pass really isn't that awful at the end of the day, especially with the pass rush they have, Nick, not very good. I think the secondary's talented. I think it's a really good unit. I think there's certainly going to be some leaders here. It's really going to up this defense overall with the tenacity.
This is a very talented secondary unit. I like this unit a lot here. I think there are some seriously good players here. Gifford, he adds a lot on the table, kind of plays that rover role. I think he's a good player to have. 70 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 1 sack, 3 pass breakups. Good piece to have there. I think he's a creative piece that can do a whole lot for your team. I like Newsome at cornerback, 44 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 10 pass breakups. He's probably their best true coverage option. I like Newsome a lot. He's a very good player. Hartzog as well is a good player. He had 3 picks, 22 total tackles. Good leadership role there. Omar Brown getting better, kind of move him around a little bit. Probably slot him on the inside, but he's a talented player. Tommy Hill as well, good player, 17 total tackles for him. Buford, probably move him on the inside as well, slot him on the inside. Maybe play him at free safety, good player, 59 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 2 picks, and 3 pass breakups for him. And then Miles Farmer, second leading tackler on the team with 73 total tackles, plus a pick and 4 pass breakups. He's a good player. You kind of move him around as well. He's got a lot of different options there. Probably play him at free safety, move him a little bit. I think the secondary has a lot of good options, great depth here, good leadership, good experience. The secondary is a very good unit, very slept on. One of the better ones in the Big Ten that people are not talking about.
Yeah, I think they'll certainly showcase that, especially this pass rush that had 21 sacks a season ago can step up, but they do lose their top 3 pass rushers, so that's something that's not going to really be beneficial for them. Overall, B- for me. I think tenacity in the trenches and better production all around are some things they have to monitor. And, I certainly think that there's some potential to see some improvement, especially with that secondary and then the leaders in the middle. Just really not sure at this moment in time, considering the disappointment from a season ago. And now you undergo a schematic change.
Certainly will be difficult to go under a schematic change. I think the 3-3-5 will ultimately be great. Like I said, I think it kind of bodes well in a more physical league like the Big Ten. So that works a lot for me there. I think it's going to take some time to build. This secondary is fantastic. It really does play the strength of this team operating the 3-3-5. So I think it's a really good idea to make that change. I think the front seven, the front six rather, really needs to find a way, especially that front three. I think the interior of the trenches, they got to work on it. That's been a problem for this Nebraska team. They got to find a way to recruit some talent on the interior and work on that.
Now, the schedule preview and prediction. Last season I was hopeful for this team. It was a complete disaster. Remember, Kirk Herbstreit picked them to win their division, and I was like, that's a pretty good pick. I could totally see that happen. Yeah, that didn't happen one bit. So the Adam Jeff Sims, though, should certainly alleviate some of the negative plays. But the offensive line was straight awful, and although they should be slightly better, won't be banking on a major improvement. Pretty deep at running back and at wide receiver. So the offense overall has a good ceiling. Defensive side of the ball also saw weakness in the trenches. Some fresh faces is nice to see, but plenty of playing time is up for grabs. Linebacking core has two good players, and the secondary is one of the deeper units on this team. But overall, this is a program that's just been flat out awful, Nick. Let's see how it goes. Matt Rhule, first year, I think 5-7 would be a pretty good mark. I think there's some games they can compete in. Maybe September 30th against Michigan, he can try and pull a stunner there. At Wisconsin, they also host Iowa. At Illinois will be an interesting game. So there's plenty of opportunities here to make, a stake for a claim here in this conference. I think you can certainly make some statements in this early coaching tenure with who's on the schedule. Don't see it happening, but I think it'll be fun to watch, especially that Sea of Red if they come to Omaha.
Certainly interesting schedule early on. I like that they get Minnesota on that Friday night first week sort of thing. Minnesota always gets or Thursday night. Minnesota always gets that Thursday night game early in the season, and this year it's Nebraska. They travel on the road to Minnesota. That's a very interesting game. Kind of set the tempo there. I like that match. National eyes will be on that Thursday. It's going to be on Fox. A very exciting game. I really like the Big Ten schedules that every year. A good kind of way to kick things off. At Colorado, I think it's very interesting. Old rivals playing together. Deion Sanders, obviously, early on in his tenure. That could be a very big game for both schools. This is a really big opportunity for Nebraska to get a win on the road. Potentially, I think at Illinois, they could potentially upset the Fighting Illini, at home to Iowa. That's a game they could certainly get. I think 6-6 is very achievable here. I think 5-7, 6-6 sort of the range here. I think they could get a extra game at home. I like the schedule first year. There are some tough road tests with trips to Michigan State and Wisconsin and Illinois, but it's not too difficult. Kind of a good balance here for this Nebraska team. A lot of talent in the secondary, and this offense can find a way to kind of gel under a new system. This team could certainly upset a few teams here and there. I think this is a right schedule to kind of start things off. This team could be heading in a positive direction.
Yeah, that September 9th game at Colorado will be an interesting one, too. First-year head coaches, plenty of eyes on both programs. That one in Boulder will be something to monitor. Should be a pretty solid season overall for Nebraska. Obviously, 5-7 will be, the seventh straight losing season. Fans wouldn't be happy with that. But we're really just looking for improvement this season. Same could be said about Colorado. It doesn't really matter about the record at the end of the year. You just want to see some competitiveness. That's the same thing we said about Kansas in the past, and they showed competitiveness last year, and that's a great starting spot.
I agree. I think this is a team that's heading in the right direction. Matt Rhule, like I said, is a great hire. I think 5-7, obviously, Nebraska fans, they want to see winning seasons, and certainly I don't blame them, but I think this is going to be a slow start here. It's going to be a deep rebuild. Scott Frost left this program in a tough, disaster-like state. It's going to be a bit of a deep rebuild here. I think this is a good stepping stone early on the schedule. There's some opportunity for some wins here, certainly.
That's going to be it for today's episode. As always, Nick, I appreciate you joining me.
Absolutely. I'm excited for Nebraska here. I really want this program to come back. I think college football is better when schools like Nebraska are competitive. I'm excited to see what they do during the Matt Rhule era. I'm excited to see how this team recruits. I think this is a fun team to watch in the future. I'm excited to see how this defense transitions into 3-3-5. Overall, a lot of good storylines to watch, and it's great that they play week one on national television Thursday night. All eyes will be on them.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.